Hi there, this is Gina Piccolo, and this is my presentation on the astrology of Donald Trump. I recorded this on April 22nd, and it was live on Instagram. So because of an audio issue, I am having to record the audio from my Instagram recording, which you will hear is a little bit tinny, but you'll be able to follow along. You'll also hear me talking to folks you cannot see, but you'll have the slides to guide you through it. Enjoy.
So you're not going to see a lot of fun gifts on this one because, frankly, I feel like we have enough imagery of Mr. Trump. So I put this sort of relaxing beach scene just to start. And then, hey, Laura, I'm just going to wait a minute for some folks to come on. So today I'm going to be talking about Donald Trump and the astrology for this year and how that might look if we're looking in the context of, re-election, sort of how this might manifest. I'm using this chart that has an AA rating. There is actually a rating system that astrologers use to gauge the veracity of a birth time. And this one is very good. AA is the highest rating you can get. So we know that the chart I'm using is the best information we have as far as his birth time. So for Donald, that means that he's a Leo rising, not surprising, with the sun in Gemini and the moon in Sagittarius. And interestingly, he was born on a lunar eclipse, which is going to make a lot of sense when we get into this year. He's about to go through an 18-month process of kind of rebirthing a whole new version of himself. And that's how that eclipse is going to activate his chart. We're about to enter the Sagittarius Gemini eclipse cycle in June. A couple things I want to note about his chart here. Let's see if I put it here. Yeah. I'm going to back up. A couple things I want to note are the 12th house, Saturn and Venus. Now, this is the 12th house in astrology is really about things that are buried in the subconscious, things that we don't have conscious access to as a psyche. And Donald Trump's narcissism basically lives in that 12th house. The Saturn conjunct Venus can mean he did not get the love that every being in this life deserves in his childhood, and that there's this deep, deep sense of unworthiness as a result. So that is the piece of him that's going to get really activated and has already been really activated this year. That's Saturn, Venus, and the 12th. So we're going to talk about that more as I move into the rest of this chart. Okay, so basically I want to start with where he is right now. Gauging the fact that transiting Venus is right over his sun during the month of May suggests that, and it's kind of hovering there now, suggests that he has about 3 more weeks of a lot of self-confidence and even a sense of self-indulgence. That's what the Venus on the sun can suggest. Now, in Donald Trump's chart, the sun is very important because it rules his whole chart as a Leo rising. So anything going on with the sun in the sky and anything in the sky activating his natal sun is something that we want to pay attention to. The transiting sun happens to be in his 10th house, the most public, the most, the most public place that we have in our charts is being lit up for him. So he's actually probably feeling, I mean, there's some other things going on that suggest his confidence is getting dinged a little bit, but he's also managing to keep up this air of control, this air of being on top of the world. And I think we've seen that in the headlines with him inciting people to protest and actually getting some results. Okay, so that's Venus. And after this, okay, I had to put in one little GIF here. After that, there's a little bit of a situation that starts to develop for him when Venus is going to station retrograde right on top of his sun. Now, a lot of you probably know about Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrogrades, generally is a time of review, of misunderstandings. All of the themes that go with Mercury kind of go in reverse. Well, the same is true when we look at Venus retrograde. All of the themes that have to do with Venus, which means popularity, which means attractiveness, which means money flowing easily, which means feeling affection towards the women in your life. All of that stuff starts to go backwards for Donald Trump because it's on his sun. So with the Venus stationing retrograde right around May 13th on his sun, and then it's also opposed his natal moon. So anything that happens to Donald Trump's ego is also happening to him on the inside emotionally because of him being born on that full moon. So this is going to be noticeable. We'll probably see some things shift for him right around mid-May. Whatever confidence he has right now starts to go in reverse. The other thing that's happening is that Jupiter, transiting Jupiter in the sky, is going to oppose his natal Venus. And this could suggest anything going on with his day-to-day routines, with the way he interacts with his staff, with his work life, really starts to go sideways. With Jupiter going retrograde, the themes of Jupiter, which have to do with plans, have to do with optimism, which have to do with knowledge and generosity, all of that stuff starts to go in reverse for him. So it could be a time in that mid-May period where you start to see him second guessing himself. Because of his personality type, second guessing himself doesn't look like being humble or going into humility. It looks like going into his narcissism. So that's kind of what we may see now. All of this is sort of building up to that lunar eclipse on June 5th. The lunar eclipse is the very first one in this new series of Sagittarius and Gemini. And this is going to activate that area that rules his house, that rules his sun and his moon. It actually could have something to do with things shifting and changing in his actual home life, particularly his wife. But that lunar eclipse is not super comfortable for him. And the reason that I feel that's true is that it's squaring Mars, and it will be squaring Mars for all of us, squaring Mars in the sky. And with a square, we're sort of confronted to take action. We're forced to take action. For him, that square to Mars is also pretty closely connected to Neptune in the house of crisis in his chart, in the house of shared finances. We could see that lunar eclipse demand that that he's confronted with his own delusions where the economy is concerned. That could have something to do with it. Now, I should also mention that in this presentation, I'm not going too deeply into the United States chart because there's so much to unpack with Donald Trump. I figured we would start with this one, and then I could do another presentation where we look at Donald Trump's chart related to the United States and with COVID. There's plenty to talk about just looking at the transits and his solar return and his progressed chart. There's enough here to talk about that'll be a complete sort of presentation. So that's June 5th. We'll start to see, his response to these difficulties, because his core wound is activated. There's this deep insecurity in him that he is not consciously aware of that gets activated, and as a result, you could see the impulsive use of power. I mean, this is something that we've seen with him in the past, so it's not beyond the realm of possibility, and the fact that the astrology backs it up makes me feel like, yeah, it could probably happen. So the other thing I wanted to mention here is the solar return chart. And generally speaking, when we're looking at anybody's year ahead, we look at several different charts. We look at the transits, so that's where the planets are in the zodiac at any given moment. We look at the solar return chart, which is like a birthday to birthday forecast, right? For him, I think it's pretty interesting to note that from his June 13th birthday until June 13th of 2021, he is not looking super confident and definitely confronted with the themes around confinement and confusion. I mean, we're all dealing with confinement, but in his chart, it looks like it just gets more pronounced, that particular theme. He has the sun, the solar return sun in the 12th house, squaring all this Pisces in the 9th. He really feels trapped, is what I would say, and definitely feels a little delusional around what's possible. This could also be, his focus on the sickness of his, the nation. Because the 12th house rules institutions, it suggests that from year to, from birthday to birthday, his focus is on this virus. That's assuming that he gets reelected. But it could also suggest that he himself is not feeling 100%. And there's some other things looking like in June that may suggest that he gets sick. I don't want to say he does, but there is this thing in June, this other solar eclipse, June 21st. And I should also mention that June is kind of a bonkers time frame because we've got all this stuff going on. We have 2 eclipses, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and Neptune retrograde. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it's really dinging his chart. So June is going to be a month to watch for changes happening with Donald Trump. So that June 21st eclipse is at 0 degrees Cancer. Now this is really important because 0 degrees of a cardinal sign is a really potent degree. So it's already a very potent new moon. But it's at 0 degrees of a cardinal sign, which makes it even more so. Cardinal signs are sort of the beginning of are the beginning of each season. So, we have Aries is the beginning of spring, Cancer, the beginning of summer, Libra, the beginning of fall, and Scorpio, the beginning of winter. So, these are really, strong energetic points. And for him, this is happening in that 12th house again. So, one of the things that I think it may bring up about are sudden events around security, because Cancer rules security, issues with the sick and the needy, and hospitals and institutions, which, we're already seeing that. Because this is closely aligned, I mean, it's within 8 degrees. It's a wide orb, as they say in astrology, but this eclipse is very close to Mercury in his chart. And Mercury is an important planet in Donald Trump's chart because he's a sun in Gemini. His sun is ruled by the planet Mercury. Mercury also rules our respiratory system, our lungs. As you know, COVID is a respiratory illness. The fact that he has this going on in the 12th house with a Mercury retrograde near his natal Mercury, which is his ruling planet, is, it's in the realm of possibility that he gets ill. I don't want to predict anyone's illness, but these are just, unpacking the symbology of astrology and the way it looks. So that's what I would say. The next eclipse is July 4th and 5th, depending on where you are on the globe. And for him, this again is activating that Mercury. Now, at this point, the July 4th, 5th eclipse is going to be during that Mercury retrograde. The Mercury retrograde is going to be exactly conjunct within a degree or so of his natal Mercury. Because this is a similar degree to a lunation and an eclipse that we had January 5th, 2019, and I haven't gone through the headlines to sort of dig in and see what was going on with him in January 2019, but we could see a culmination of whatever started then to kind of resolve around this July 4th eclipse. We could see pre-existing health issues worsen. because, again, these eclipses have been taking place in the same spot in his chart for the last 18 months to 2 years. So whatever it is that comes up is something he's already been dealing with, maybe not consciously, because it's been happening in that 12th house. It's something that he may not have been paying attention to, and it may just start to get worse. Because this is squaring the Mars Chiron conjunction in his 9th house, this could also involve some sort of overseas decision that he has to make. Some sort of action has to be taken around things that are happening abroad. You know, he's been having Uranus in the 10th house since May of 2017, I believe it was, or 2018. So his professional life is in a long phase of crisis. His professional life is going to be in that area, you know, for the next, I believe, 5 years. This will be just another one of those moments when something comes up out of the blue professionally that requires him to take some action around an overseas issue. Okay, so there's so much to unpack here. It's like, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface with this thing. So now this brings us to June 28th, July 5th. And this is when we really look at that piling up on Donald Trump's, you know, what I would deem the narcissistic wound. And this is, if you know anything about narcissism, often folks who have these traits were raised without unconditional love. They were raised in a home that did not nurture their sense of self. So they have a very fractured sense of self. That part of him is going to get very piled up on around that June 28th to July 5th because of Jupiter and Pluto exactly opposite Saturn. So his insecurities that he's not even conscious exist get really activated. And oftentimes with that narcissistic personality, what we see is the projections of those insecurities onto other people in his realm, because he doesn't know necessarily how to deal with them in his own consciousness. So this could be a very troubled period for him, that last week of June, that first week of July. We could see some things happening for him that just exacerbate all these problems he's been dealing with. So I'm going to skip ahead now to October, because October is the next time frame that looks very interesting for his chart. And it's a time where, well, I'm afraid to make too many predictions here. I'm just going to unpack the astrology as it looks to me, and then we can sort of watch and see what happens in the news. Okay, so October 1st. Here's something that, you know, a lot of this looks negative. A lot of the other things I said look negative for Donald Trump. This is a little bit more positive. And some astrologers are predicting that he actually pulls through and wins re-election. I'm not really predicting one way or another. I'm just going to unpack what I see here. So October 1st looks like he's in a good spot. I don't know what's going on, but he has the North Node. He's having what's called a nodal return. A nodal return is when the North and the South Node, and these are basically just points floating in space. They are not planets. They're just little energetic points in space, but they represent our karmic path, and they represent turning points in our lives. When the North Node lines up with the Sun, for example, that's very fortuitous. That suggests that you're embracing something new after releasing something old, that self-improvement becomes a really big possibility, and that good opportunities, good fortune, and new opportunities come into your life. Okay, so he's starting off, it looks like, anyway, October, feeling strong, feeling really good. Having maybe gone through something, well, obviously going through a really tough summer, he seems to sort of pull out. But there's other information that comes to light here. Okay, I put one GIF of Donald Trump, of him sipping water with his tiny hands. Okay, Halloween. Halloween looks very interesting. There's a full moon in Taurus. It's at 8 degrees Taurus, very closely aligned to the new moon that's happening today. So we watch, watch what's going on right now, because we're going to be revisiting this again right around Halloween. And whatever's starting right now is going to end right around Halloween. The full moon around Halloween is 8 degrees. It's exactly conjunct Uranus. And when that happens, you cannot predict what is going to come out. It's surprising. Okay, it's definitely going to be unexpected, out of the blue. And for him, it's taking place right in that 10th house, during a Mercury retrograde in his 3rd house that is square that narcissistic wound. Now, one way we could describe this, there's obviously a surprise spotlight on his reputation. There could very well be women leaving his life. I'm wondering if Melania doesn't see the what's that phrase? The writing on the wall come October, and really is like, I'm out for real. I'm out, and she's going to leave him. I mean, she may have already left him. When's the last time we saw her? But it gets that definitely comes up many, many times in his chart when we get to the fall. His marriage starts to really unravel in a way that he cannot deny any longer. So around this full moon on Halloween, he's forced to exert some sort of control and some sort of part of his power as a means of managing that insecurity. So this is something we've seen over and over in his administration, his presidency, where he gets threatened, his security gets threatened personally, and he lashes out. We could see that happening around that Halloween. Halloween this year, and this is literally, these are days before the election. Mars is retrograde, Mercury is retrograde, Uranus is aligned with a full moon. God knows what could light up. It really is, and this is a square, this full moon has a square aspect to Pluto in the 1st house. Something really gets volatile that time frame. So yeah, I would be very interested to know how that. Now, the one thing that I'm looking at the same time that he has the North Node conjunct the Sun, which, as I mentioned, positive opportunities, feeling good about himself, the South Node is on the Moon. He's letting go of something, either a woman in his life, his domestic situation is changing dramatically, but the South Node on the Moon acts as a drain. And the moon also represents the emotional state. So whatever he's getting positively, he's having to pay a big, heavy price for. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, election day. This could probably be, well, I'm just gonna unpack it, all right? So the North Node is still on his Sun. It's still opportunity, feeling good, all of that stuff. It represents a major crossroads. That is one thing, no matter, good, bad, or the other, it's a major crossroads. It's a karmic transition, election day for Donald Trump. It's a time of wrapping up an old phase, an old experience. So just looking at the transits for election day, I could see how an astrologer might say, yeah, he might pull it out. He might pull it out and win. But there's another chart that, to me, and I'll get to this, doesn't look so positive. We do know that the aspects of his chart that are getting activated on election day are making him very irritable, very restless, highly emotional, reckless, impulsive, ready to make some changes in his domestic life, ready to, his personal life is definitely becoming something he can't ignore any longer. And there are a lot of misunderstandings and secrets. And that's something that I think, without question, we can expect some sort of October surprise that is going to dig into his past, dig into his insecurities, dig into his relationships with women that just pop up at the days before the election. So I would expect that. whether or not it's enough to force him to lose the election, I don't know. I don't know about that. Okay. Now let's look at the week after the election. This is, for me, this feels where it's like, oh, okay, maybe he doesn't win. The transit Jupiter-Pluto is in a very uncomfortable alignment with his sun, which, if you just look at the astrology and interpret the astrology, one interpretation is he's walking away from a position of power that has turned bad. He's in a process of letting go. A powerful life experience has ended. These are things that I literally pulled out of a book, not politicized, but, that's the transit he's experiencing. Okay, then there's a solar eclipse in December. Now, this really lights up his south node and his domestic life. This is a solar eclipse. It's a new moon conjunct his south node and his moon. This is new domestic situations. This is changes involving family, difficulty with a woman. He's moody, he's drawn to the past, he's feeling fearful, and his popularity has plummeted. That does not sound like he won the election. Maybe he did, and his wife is like, yeah, I'm out, I'm not doing another 4 years of this, and maybe he pulls out the election in some corrupt way, so he's still not popular. But it doesn't feel great. If he does win the election, it doesn't seem like it's a great victory when we're looking at this solar eclipse. And remember, he was born on a solar eclipse. So these solar eclipse, the one that's happening December 14th, lights up his natal solar eclipse. So this is major karma coming back. Now, then we get to December 21st. This is where I feel more confident saying I could see how he doesn't win, because the ascendant, the progressed ascendant, now this is a different kind of chart. We've looked at the transits, we've looked at the solar return, birthday to birthday. Now I'm looking at the progressed chart. There have been some things in his progressed chart that looked pretty good, but then when we get to December 21st, and remember, December 21st is a pretty that's an energetic portal right there, the solstice. A lot of power there. Not only that, but we are starting literally on that day, December 19th, a couple days before, we are starting the Aquarian age. Jupiter's conjunct Saturn in Aquarius for the first time in I can't remember, it's like 700 years, I think, is the first time we've had this in an air sign. So this is a moment, right? December 21st, 2020 is a moment. On that day, his progressed ascendant, so this is how he projects himself out into the world, shifts from Libra. Libra is very much about social, being very social, being very interested in putting yourself out there, being very public, trying to get people to like you, right? He's been in that phase since 1984. And if you look at the headlines from that time, which I did, 1984 was when he just started to kind of come out from under his father's shadow and project his own power. He started buying up lots of real estate. He started buying football teams and was going on television. And I think he even had like a run for president during that time, like I feel like something happened in the late 80s, but definitely this was the beginning. 1984 was the beginning of him becoming president, and that ends December 21st. He moves from that social, public place of like gathering that, really satisfying that narcissistic need for attention and positive attention. And then it shifts to Scorpio. So Scorpio is a totally different ballgame. Scorpio is much more isolated, much more, it's darker. It's more cynical. It's more private. That doesn't sound like someone who gets elected president to me. And the fact that this ends a cycle that started in the 80s when we know he was starting his ascent, his popularity ascent, if you will, it just feels very interesting to me that yeah, it looks to me like that's the time frame where he really realizes it's the end of an era for him. Okay, and then the last couple slides here is this. Now we're looking at inauguration day. Okay, so I chose these dates to sort of see how he was feeling at these times, to see what the astrology says he's feeling. The January 20th does not look like a great day for him, and here's why. Mars is conjunct Uranus in that area that rules his reputation. This is not, doesn't feel like he is being celebrated on that day. It feels like he is being forced to, you know, I don't know, it's one way to describe that Uranus-Mars conjunction is train wreck in the professional life. This is all squaring that Pluto in his first house. It's squaring transit Saturn in the first house. It just feels like, you know, the dream has ended and he's being confronted with the you know, the results of his actions over the last few years. The other big piece of this is again, home and family life are changing. Insecurities are being activated. Definitely feels like he's going to be moving. You know, I don't know, doesn't sound like somebody who's being celebrated. Now, we still have that North Node hovering near his sun. You know, I think some astrologers would say, okay, that looks pretty good. I don't know. The rest of it looks pretty loud, like, yeah, he's not happy. He is not looking like this is a big celebratory moment. It feels a little bit like his marriage is over. He's having to leave the White House, and his reputation is in shambles. Uranus conjunct Mars in the 10th. So that is what I have. If anyone has any questions on the live, let me know. And I'm not sure if we have the ability here to do those questions on the Zoom. Can't really see that. But I hope that that's something that will give you all a little bit of, I don't know, hope or something to chew on, definitely. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a second one of these to look at the relationship to Donald Trump's chart to the United States chart. Will you do Biden's chart? Yeah, I don't know if Biden has a AAA rated or AA rated birth time. I'm pretty sure, I mean, we know that he's a Scorpio, but yeah, I will see what birth times are available. It really depends on how accurate that birth time was, because last presidential election, astrologers really had egg on their faces because they had a bad birth time for Hillary, and they predicted that she was going to win. And it was this huge public thing, like, oh yeah, astrology is bullshit. But it was really because they didn't have good information. They didn't have good birth data. So that really makes a difference.